All right, welcome to Week 7 Forum. If you look at the PowerPoint in the course resources section for this chapter, you will see that I return to the concept of path dependency. Past decisions matter. This week we're looking at the New Deal, which represents the beginning of a major shift in how federalism was interpreted as a governing principle. But it was a shift that was made possible by the 40-year period of the Progressive Era and in the 19-year attempt by Republicans to return to normalcy. We should always remember that the New Deal was a response to the profound nature of the threat to the American constitutional regime posed by the Great Depression. Remember, the Great Depression hit in 1929, preceded by 9 years of uninterrupted Republican control of government. Herbert Hoover, likely one of the most able of the interwar Republican presidents, was placed in a position that was totally at odds with his talents. This was the guy who rebuilt Europe after World War I, the engineer who saved millions from starvation, the man who was called by 6 governors to organize the federal response to the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927. He was an able man who was constitutionally unsuited to the job of leading America out of the Great Depression, largely because of the party that he led. Think about this quote from Herbert Hoover's Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Melton, which is also quoted in my PowerPoint. Liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, liquidate real estate. It will purge the rottenness from the system. That quote represented the dominant ideological predisposition in the business establishment and in the Republican Party of that day. And it represented the dominant view of the government's relationship between the government and the economy. For all the successes of the Progressive Era, the movement's attempts to harness the power of the federal government to regulate economic activity were frustrated by federalism. So why did the New Deal ultimately succeed where progressivism failed? The answer to that, we just can't overlook the role that elections played in creating the kind of unified control over government that Democrats were able to use to push forward the New Deal. Take the midterm elections of 1930. That was Hoover's first midterm, which occurred roughly a year into the Great Depression. Resulted in Democrats winning 5 seats in the House or in the Senate, but failing to take the Senate. But they would win additional Senate seats in the next 3 election cycles, and by 1938, they controlled 75 Senate seats. In the House, they won 52 seats in 1930, but again fell just 2 seats shy of winning control of Congress. But again, 1930 would be the first of 3 consecutive election cycles in which Democrats would win seats. And by 1936, Democrats had let's think about this, a 334 to 88 advantage in the House. Let those numbers sink in for a minute. 75% of the Senate seats were in Democratic hands. 76% of the House seats were controlled by Democrats. That dominance, as much as anything, was required for a change of this magnitude. Someone born in the year of FDR's first inauguration would have been 20 years old before they would see another Republican inaugurated president. So one of the parts of this chapter that I find particularly powerful is that the decentralized nature of the Democratic Party posed a real obstacle to rapid national action. I think the quote from Senate Majority Leader Joseph Robinson, Democrat of Arkansas, illustrates the attitudes of the old guard wing of the Bourbon Southern Democrats. This is something that I have in the PowerPoint. It's quoted from Ira Katznelson's Fear Itself. So long as the New Dealers fought the money power and the big industries, so long as they were pro-farmer and didn't stir up the niggers, he was for them. He was with them. How were the New Dealers able to overcome the factionalized, fractious nature of the Democratic Party in that period and the overt racism of one of their major wings to get so much done in that first 100 days? Another issue that Robertson handles deftly are the far-reaching implications of agricultural reform. In the opening days of the Great Depression, a lot of reformers believed that moving quickly on agriculture would be the quickest way to help combat the worst suffering in the United States. Robertson does a really good job of noting something about government action. No matter how well-meaning, the more the government acts, the more the government changes the nature of the sector that they're attempting to regulate or reform. In agriculture, New Dealers found that the most effective and efficient way of helping the agricultural sector was to steer a lot of aid through the Farm Bureau, which was a powerful interest group that represented a lot of wealthy farmers. So what were the implications of steering the Agricultural Adjustment Act's subsidies through an interest group that represented only a fairly small cross-section of American farmers? Even the most progressive reforms oftentimes have, you know, unimagined consequences. As you read this material, think about how federalism was at times a help as well as a hindrance to New Dealers. They worked with it sometimes. Sometimes they tried to, evade it or overcome it. How did the FDR administration use the states to help with relief efforts? What was the origin of the Social Security Administration, for example? Was this initially a state-led effort that got nationalized, similar to progressive era reforms? Why wasn't national health care tacked onto this legislation? They thought about it. What were the obstacles to expanding, and doing something that probably would have had a significant help for people's, health outcomes? How effective were New Deal efforts to extend political rights to organized labor? What were the obstacles to the inclusion of organized labor as political institutions that you simply don't see in European politics? Finally, how would you evaluate the legacy of the New Deal era? What, in your opinion, were the best features of the New Deal? Which issues did the New Deal fail to succeed in? In what areas were New Deal victories at best Pyrrhic in nature? I hope I've given you some interesting ways of thinking about this epic period of American federalism, and I hope I've gotten your critical, imaginative juices flowing as to how the decisions made nearly 90 years ago continue to impact our political institutions today. Let's have a great discussion.